Here we are continuing on with this review for CzechRaizor.
Right, hello again, and let's resume the Big Five review with the third part. Okay, I think in the part 2 I dealt with some opens and complete spots and some pre-flop decisions. So in this part I will skip through more hands and just focus on the big pots, so we can get to the final table in reasonable time. Okay, pocket tens in the button. As we get a lot shorter, my strategy will change very drastically or rapidly. Now I should focus on playing good hands and getting value out of my opponents getting mistakes or doing mistakes, getting in with a weaker range and punishing limps and so on and so on. So should be very risk averse, should conserve my chips and just pick a big spot to get all in. And this is a very premium spot with a very good hand and some limps behind me, or in front of me rather, so lots of dead money in the pot, which is great.
So you keep mentioning here that you really do not want to splash around and take spots that may lose you chips, and I'm much more inclined to be willing to splash around a bit. And what I mean by this is, like, if I'm in the small blind here with some junky hand, I'm going to call getting good odds. The fact that it does lose me chips, and it is, 1/20th of my stack, I don't think is that big of a deal. So I'm not saying you should necessarily be calling with all sorts of trash, right? But say you had 9-8 suited here on the button, and you thought that if you shoved, you were going to get called a reasonable amount of the time. I think calling is perfectly fine. But anyway, shoving here is, of course, standard.
Once this player, CzechRaizor's, I just decided to shove, which is a pretty clear play at this point. It is a race, so I won. I imagine first out of many flips all the way to the final and final table and heads up. Anyway, so very standard support. This is a very favorable situation for me because I have lots of dead money, and yeah, I managed to hold and win the flip.
It's always good to win flips.
7x suited. I like opening over 20 big blinds. These guys are not very 3-bet happy. I do not mind playing this hand in position once I get a caller or two. So very clear open. What about 7-5 suited and 6-4 suited and 6-5 suited? How about these? And opening from cutoff into these players. I would definitely open 6-7 suited, but I'm not sure about 6-4 and 7-4 suited.
I think those are probably folds.
Okay, one caller from the button.
Really, though, when I say those are probably folds, if you think the players are going to be very tight and very passive, I think raising is fine. These players, playing 20% of hands, 40-something% of hands, I'm definitely folding versus these players because they're not going to just give you the blinds. Then you're playing a relatively junky hand after the flop. But again, if you think they're very weak after the flop, then maybe it's still fine because they're just going to give you that free big blind by calling pre-flop and check folding when they miss on the flop.
And I think it's very interesting. I do not remember what I did in the hand, and now I can see myself doing both. I imagine that he's got enough jack tens and queen jacks and queen tens and maybe even some blocking pocket suited connectors and connectors. So he should not have too many of those. But I think that he should have enough folds for me to make a 40% of a pot value bet, continuation bet. It is obviously not for value in this spot, because there are some good turn cards for me to get or gain more equity on. Obviously, diamond, 6, 10. I could barrel ace or king, maybe a queen, but not too sure about this. I will be barreling ace and king, and hitting 7 or 8 should improve me to a best hand. So yeah. Not 100% sure, but given these reasons, I would continuation bet.
So on a board this dry, I am just going to go ahead and bet, like you said. Your opponent's going to fold out king high, queen high, jack high, etc. And you have a little bit of equity to improve. You can also continue barreling on some turns, mainly diamonds. So I like betting.
But I can't remember. Okay, I decided to check. Yeah. So again, I wonder whether it's reasonable to make a continuation, not value bet, but continuation bet, with all the thoughts that I just expressed and all the reasoning behind this. whether it's sufficient or whether I'm on the wrong track. Yeah. Once we get to the turn and I hit my pair, I think it's going to be good enough. All good percent of the time, so I can value bet. I'm betting in 1200 with the intention of value betting, getting paid by some straight draws, flush draws, maybe ace high. Some weaker players maybe decide to go king queen once and so on and so on. So this is a clear value bet, and I think going for smaller size is good because I'm targeting his weak hands.
It's kind of interesting that if I bet the flop and the turn was a 7, I would definitely check on the turn, because then you have to assume most of the worst hands are going to fold. So if I did check the flop, or if I bet the flop, I would check this turn. If I checked the flop, I would probably bet this turn, and I would bet small as you do. And I agree for all the reasons you said. You're trying to get called by a relatively weak range, and I think if you bet small, ace high will continue. Obviously, all pairs are going to continue. Maybe even king high will call if you bet this small. So I like this. This is a well-played turn bet.
You could also have pocket 5, 6s, some low pocket pairs. And once he's got overcards, I'm not giving him the right price. So I'm happy with going for a smaller size. Maybe could have even gone like 900, 1k, 1100, 1200. I think all these sizings are reasonable. I get a call. This is not a very good river. For obvious reasons that flush got there. Pocket 5s could be a little bit of concern. He could have pocket 5s. 8-6 suited. Can't have a6 of diamonds. So he can have a6 of clubs, a6 of clubs, hearts and spades. Could be a part of his range. So I don't think I can value bet anymore. So for this reason, I should be checking. And once he bets, I should be planning to check fold. Because passive players overall, they do not turn hands into a bluff. Like, let's say he called turn with ace deuce and decided it's not any good anymore on this river and decided to turn it into a bluff. This does not happen at all. It's very unfrequent play from these guys. Okay, and I did get one call from ace high, so, and I was right that he didn't turn it into a bluff. So I'm quite, in this spot I'm pretty sure it's okay to check fold. Wonder if I can value bet, but as I can, well, presuming, I suppose not. Right,
so on that river, I think I would go ahead and continue value betting. The main thing you want to be aware of there is your opponent inclined to bluff the river if you check? If your opponent's going to be bluffing with hands like ace queen, for example, and maybe king highs if they floated with king highs, then I definitely think you want to check. But I don't think many people are going to be betting with that range that you tried to target on the turn. That range you tried to target is mostly weakish showdown value hands. I think if it's a weak showdown value range, most people are not going to turn that range into a bluff, especially with stats like 25/7 or whatever the guy had. So I think I probably would have went ahead and value bet that river. I think a value bet would be a little bit better than the sizing you chose.
Very premium hand. Very... Okay, my hold'em manager just crashed, so I'm sorry. Right, hello again, and let's resume the Big 5 review with the third part.
Oh, well.
Okay, I think I dealt with, in the part 2
The video ended. Okay. Let me start the next part.
Okay, apologies for the technical difficulty of my hold'em manager crashing. So let's focus on these queens in the middle position and facing under gun open from a very short stack. If this guy was a regular, I would be somewhat concerned that it is a premium hand from somebody raising 12 or 13, 14 big blinds from the early position. But given the stats, 47-36, it could be just a recreational player, and I'm still feeling very good about my hand. And I am going to 3-bet call, hopefully. That would be my default in this spot.
I think calling is also not so bad. Whenever your opponents are very short, and notice his stats are just ridiculous, right? I think that calling becomes a much stronger play, especially when you see 3 people behind you all have very nice shoving stacks. So I think I would actually call on this spot, mainly because this guy's so crazy. If I did 3-bet, it would certainly be small to 1,800. That would be my standard sizing in this spot because you really want to give this guy plenty of room to shove or even call. You don't really care because your hand's so good. So I'm definitely going to not make it big here. Whenever you make it, well, this isn't even big, but whenever you make it 3 times his raise, whenever he's this short, he's only going to put it in with good hands. So I definitely think you want to make it smaller.
We can make it quite large because I do not think it matters too much, and I do not want to see like 1750, 18, and then see over cards on the flop. It is only part of a problem that he might hit them, but he might work as scare cards, and they might get up the hook and manage to fold and keep half of this stack. So I do imagine, and I see at these small stakes players doing this mistake, that they can call off half of the stack pre-flop and then decide to fold and keep the rest 4, 5, 6 big blinds, and I do not want this to happen. So this is the reason why I chose the large sizing, and I don't think it matters too much.
So I kind of disagree with that whole assessment because, I mean, if you know your opponents will call off the 2400, then for sure just do that. But no one's calling off the 2400 then folding in my games. So for that reason, I don't really like this size. You mentioned that you don't want to see overcards on the flop, but you have to realize you don't just lose when overcards come, right? Obviously, an ace is bad for you. A king is actually not that bad. It's bad, but it's not that bad. And even then, it's not going to come every single time. It seems like you're kind of paranoid of seeing flops. And I think also you said that the guy, you don't think your raise sizing matters that much versus this player. But imagine this guy sitting here with like ace 2 offsuit and you decided to open because he's opening 36%, you know, so super wide. He's going to just fold to a 2400 raise, even if he is bad and splashy, I would think. But if you make it small, maybe he does decide to stick around with the ace 2 offsuit, or he decides to jam with it because he thinks he can bluff or something like that. I think you want to give your opponent every possibility to think that he has some fold equity. Whenever you make it this big, I don't think people are going to think they have fold equity. They're just going to fold their garbage. And this guy should have garbage, whereas the typical early position raiser should not have so much garbage. So he does call. You nailed it.
Yeah, once I get flat hit on this big sizing, there's a ridiculous SPR, stack board ratio, so he should not fold on too many flops unless there's.
This is a bad flop for you in theory because the jack and a 10 come, but again, it just doesn't matter because this guy's range is so wide.
It's like ace king specifically, and he decides to call pocket 9s or 10s on this flop. It's just a matter of how to get the rest of the chips in.
Well, that's good. If he checks you on the flop, I actually think you should bet tiny, like 1,000. Again, just to try to give him every illusion of fold equity. Of course, you're probably never betting 1,000 with the intention of folding anything. I mean, maybe if you had like ace 5 suited that you just got ridiculously crazy with, maybe you could bet fold that, but I don't think that's ever in your range. So I would just bet 1,000. I'm not worried about being balanced against this guy. I'm just trying to really figure out how to get him to stick around with pocket 9s or ace 7 or something like that.
And the opponent does the betting for me, so that's the only option. Click call, and he decided to call this large 3-bet with king jack off. So that kind of advocates the reason for me to go, going for larger sizing, because when I see the relative bottom of his range calling this large 3-bet out of position, that kind of advocates the larger sizing, because I should not lose value from weak part of his range or any part of his range once going for this large sizing.
So you mentioned this is the bottom of his range. I actually kind of disagree with that. So obviously he's not opening a stone 36% from early position, but let's just think about what most crazy people are going to be raising from early position. This is 22%. I was going to say he's probably raising like 25% or 30%. So let's just look at a 30% range and see what that even looks like, right? This is 30%. So pretty ridiculous, right? And you see King Jack is actually pretty nicely in the middle of the range. So he's not actually calling with the bottom of his range here. Maybe he's playing 25% and it looks like this. So you still see King Jack is not really the bottom. So just be aware of that. I think you were not adjusting so much for that guy's stack size. Or I'm sorry, for his stats.